Hello and welcome back to my channel. Thank you all for joining me. I'm Shayna Cersei and we are here on day 4 of 25 days to Christmas, where we're doing all small themed or card sized holiday or winter themed paintings. We are going to be doing a series or a trio of 3 gnomes. Now I already did a gnome drawing and painting tutorial about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, before we started the 25 days to Christmas. And I did a single gnome, and then in the drawing tutorial, I showed you how you could change up the different elements of the gnome in order to make a variety of different gnomes. So in this painting, we're actually going to put 3 of them together. And here is the trio that we are aiming for. We have a couple of different hat styles and different beard styles to put this cute little trio together. And I'm going to take you all the way from the drawing of this. This is a drawing heavy project, all the way through the painting piece of that. And of course, I am rushing through this because I am going to pick my husband up at the airport in a couple of hours. He's been gone for 8 weeks in Mississippi, so I'm very excited to have him back. But I need to do this so I can get you day 4, because silly me, why would I pre-record a whole bunch of these to release them in order? That would be the smart thing to do. So we are going to get through this painting and drawing. It's going to be fabulous. And the other piece is that I am going to be using some different tools today, or some different materials. Normally I use Dr. P.H. Martin's liquid watercolors. Those are my go-to watercolors. I use them for all of my commissions. They're light, fast, but they're also relatively expensive, or an investment to buy a large set of them. Many of the people watching may be first-time watercolorists, or just may have different materials or supplies. Pan paints are very typical, and people getting into it for the first time most likely would invest in a set of pan paints. So what I did, I went to Michael's, and I have this, I think it's the Michael's Artist Loft. So the generic brand set of 18 colors, it costs $8, and they are watercolors. They will work just fine for our purposes today. I painted this one with these watercolors. They certainly behave a little bit differently than the P.H. Martin's or some other brands, but so do all watercolors. And as you're painting, you'll get to know your colors. So we're gonna start with our composition, and we're gonna lay out this piece with our 3 gnomes. So first, after we've taped off our section of either a card, so this will be a card, it has 2 sections, and one will fold over the other when it's done. But I've taped it down to my table, given myself a nice little border around the edge of the card. And I'm gonna find the center, and I'm gonna start with my center gnome, and I'm gonna draw first, actually I'm gonna start down a little bit further so I can get nice tall hats in there. I am gonna draw my first nose. I am gonna draw a little darker than I normally would if I was doing all pure watercolor. But in this project, we're actually going to, after we're done doing the watercolor, I am gonna add a little bit of an ink line drawing onto this as well, because I think it just gives it a nice little effect. So I have my 3 noses, and I drew the middle one first because I want to try to get it as close to the middle as possible. This guy is a little bit over to the left, but that's okay. It doesn't need to be perfect. It's, you know, these 3 little gnomes are standing here for like their family portrait together. Maybe we'll think about them as 3 brothers. So the first thing I did, I drew the noses, and I'm gonna start with this one. I gave him a puffy little hat, so I just drew these little swoops across the brim of his nose and then around the top. So this is gonna be a cotton-like hat up here. And then his mustache. And I don't have enough room. I'm going right off the page there, but I actually like that it goes right into the tape line. And when we paint it, it'll cut off there, and it'll actually give it a nice effect when we peel off the tape to have that nice clean edge. So we're making a little mustache, and then we don't really have to draw the beard underneath because most of it is cut off below the frame. You can't see it, but we will be shading that in because it will be in shadow. Okay, so I have this brim. I'm going to do kind of a no brim, like it's just gonna be a straight hat, and I'm gonna go right over this guy's nose and just straight across, and then make it a little floppy down the center there. And then this guy's brim, I'm gonna do straight across, but he's gonna have more of like a satiny straight brim. And this guy's brim here, you can see is gonna be tucked in behind these other two puffier brims on the side. So his line ends right there. So now I'm gonna go back in, I'm gonna do this guy's hat. I'll do a straight line up and bent over. If you followed my gnome tutorial, you would have seen this, and then have it meet right there. And we are gonna put a little pom-pom on his hat, okay? And then this guy, we're gonna take his brim and we're gonna give him a few little waves as we come down. And actually, I don't want his pom-pom to overlap his hat because he's gonna have some really interesting stripes. So I'm gonna take my eraser and I'm gonna bring his hat in this way, like that. So he has a nice little crooked hat, and I'm gonna bring his little point down a little further, or closer to his hat there. There we go. And then last, we're gonna do this guy over here, and we're also gonna give him a bent hat, but he is not going to have a pom-pom on his. His is gonna be pom-pom-less. So they're all slightly different. He's got a straight, poofy, no pom-pom, and this guy is just kind of funky and going all the way up to the top. So I'm gonna go back in and do this guy's beard here. So I'm just gonna start at the brim of his hat. Remember, his eyes are covered, and I'm gonna make it just this shaggy, scraggly beard here. Okay, so he's got a short, scraggly beard, and this guy is just gonna have the long, pointed beard. You just can't see the bottom of it, with just a few little gathers of hair. And again, I'm gonna be going over these in ink later, so that will be totally fine that this is drawn this dark, because I'm gonna go back over in ink after I do the watercolor anyway. Okay, so that's our drawing. We have our 3 elves, all different shapes and sizes, all different beards. And now we're gonna get into the painting. So when I was looking at this one, I was trying to figure out my palette of colors. And what I usually do when I don't really know what colors to start out with, I do some swatching and put colors next to each other to see how I feel about them, to see if I like them. Now, this palette is nice because it's got this plastic lid over here, and I'm actually gonna mix my paints in here. So the first color I've started with is this, like, I wanted to see what this red would look like in here. So I took that, I added some water to it, and I swatched it out, and I was like, ooh, that's a nice, like, pretty burgundy color for holidays, for Christmas. It has a nice muted color, you know, it's not that bright red, so it's that vintagey kind of muted look. I really like country chic look. I really liked it. So off of that, then I tried this green, and I was like, whoa, that is too bright of a green for me, no way. So then I took some of this green. Ugh, this is the part of pan paints that I hate. You have to like rinse your brush off and like get them wet every time, and then they dry after a while, and then you got to re-wet them. So honestly, I think liquid watercolors are just like the lazy person's watercolor. I guess I'm just lazy. That's why I like them so much, because I don't have to re-wet them really that much. Okay, so green, when it's too bright and it needs to be muted, and I want more of a forest green, or a sap green, if you will, take a little bit of its complementary, now a little bit, and add it to it, and it will start to mute that color. Ugh. And you also have to rinse your brush off every time in between. Okay, so I've added that red, that burgundy, and now, ooh, look at that. I have this really nice, like, deep green. Now I'm gonna add a bunch of burgundy because I'm gonna make a lot of this color. So you can see it's gone way off. It just means I have to add a lot more green back to it. But I want a lot of it because I'm gonna use it in a bunch of these stripes. Okay, I think we're, yeah, even better. So I now have this great green. So I'm gonna use this green and I'm gonna use this red. And then I needed one more color for this palette. And I was like, oh, do I wanna do like a navy blue? Would look nice, but I decided on this purple, which I thought looked great. And when I first did it, I was like, ooh, that purple is pretty bright and dark, but it does dry down pretty significantly. So after I saw it dry, I felt really good about it. If it was too bright, we could bring it down a little bit. And the opposite of purple, if I wanted to mute that color a little, is yellow. We don't have a super strong yellow in here, but you know what? We have this like lemon yellow, and then we have this like goldish yellow. I'm gonna see what that does when I add it to it. Yeah, I can see that that's working. So if I add this yellow to it, you can see how that's like way too far. But this is like somewhere in between. Let's see what happens when I do this one. Yeah, there we go. So you can see here, this is a nice purple. It brings it closer to what this purple is gonna be, but actually as this purple dries, it dries down. So I encourage you, if you are gonna swatch your colors, wait till they're dry, because sometimes they do dry down, especially with these, dare I say, slightly cheaper brands. You know, they behave differently. So you just have to figure out how they behave, and then you can use that to your advantage to understanding how they work. So I now have my colors. I have my purple, green, and then burgundy is coming straight out of here for my hats. I'll show you how to do flesh color for the noses, which this palette actually has this really nice pink that you can really just water down a lot and add a little bit of this yellow to it to make a nice peachy, peachy Nordic skin tone for our Nordic gnomes here. Oh, don't paint on that. Okay. All right, so let's get started with the hats. Now, I am gonna draw in these stripes, which I forgot to do. And, you know, you're just gonna pick a direction and then make sure to just keep following kind of parallel to that first line that you drew, even if it starts to take you on a curve, because that is how fabric would work. Is that the lines are going to stay parallel to each other, but as the fabric bends and curves, it's going to change the direction of those stripes. So I'm going to start with our let's see, I'm going to start with our purple hat over here. And actually, I'm going to take some more of this straight purple, add it to here. All right. So again, I'm going to lay down pretty much some straight color here on the corner and underneath the bend. where the bend of the hat would be, because these are going to be my darker, more shadowed areas. Under a bend or in a crease is always darkest. And then at the edges of objects, as they curve away from you, you want them to be darkest because that shows you form. And we want to show that this hat is not completely flat on the page. So I went in, I put my color down, and then I'm gonna go in, rinse my brush, pick up a little water. I always blot my brush off because I don't want pools and pools of water. The hardest part about watercolor, and the most amazing part about watercolor, is that water is part of the medium and it makes the paint, it gives the paint all of its characteristics. So the more water you have, the more translucent it is, the farther it goes, the easier it is to spread, but the more translucent it is. So if you want something that's not that translucent, that is darker and deeper and richer, you have to use thicker or more concentrated amounts of pigment, which do not spread as far or as easily. So you just have to learn this by doing. There's no like magic rule to it. It really is, for me, it just came by doing. It really, you start to get a feel for it. Like once you've touched your brush to the palette, kind of exactly how much paint is on there and what's going to happen when you touch it to the page. And you learn that by just doing. Now this one, I'm going to leave it alone, let it dry. I can tell already, just because I've used these paints before, earlier today to make the first one, that I'm going to have to put another layer on to this purple, and that's fine. But I'm going to let this one dry, and then I'm going to put another layer over top, because these do dry down, and this is going to be pretty light when it does dry. Okay, let's move to, we'll do the red or burgundy, and then we'll do Mr. Stripey Stripes in the center here, who takes a little more concentration and a little more time, but the effect is super awesome. Like as you do it, it's like, oh my gosh, look at it. It's taking form, it's taking shape. And those lines, like those candy cane stripe lines are just, they make it a lot of fun to paint. They give it form as you follow them across. And I'll show you, we're going to, similar to what we're doing right now, where we're painting our edge and then bringing it across to make form and shape. We're going to do that with our lined areas as well. And you're like, ugh, that sounds like so much work. You have to do it for every single line. And you do. It really isn't that difficult, and it has such a great effect. And I'll show you. Ugh, I'm so excited to show you. I'm rushing through this other side of this hat. Today was one of those days where I planned to get so much done, and then I look up and it was like dark already, and I hadn't done anything. Like I just wanted to clean the house, like not even like clean the house, like deep clean the house, but maybe just put the laundry away. And I feel like that took me all day long. And then it's dark out already, and I have to go to the airport in like an hour and paint a tutorial. It's one of those crazy days. All right, same thing with this guy. I'm gonna let him dry. You can see this guy is drying over here. We're getting some interesting stuff with this hard line here. I don't know if that's just because this is dry and this is not, and it'll even out once it does dry. We're gonna see, and then we're gonna add another layer. So again, all paints behave differently. They have different properties, things that are good, things that are, you wish would happen differently. And you just have to learn those about your paints. Like these are pretty chalky, but I actually like that look for some things. It gives it like kind of a nice matte chalky look. Okay, so for our stripes, we're gonna start with, before I get too far into this, we're gonna start with our green. Just making sure we have enough pigment in here. There's not too much water. All right, we're gonna start with our green, and we're just going to go, and we're gonna get a lot of pigment on the brush, and we're gonna drop in on the side here. So a little pigment there, a little pigment there. And you don't have to, and you're just gonna go about halfway across the stripe. It does not have to be a perfect line at the end. Like, you don't want it to end perfectly. Just kind of drag your brush across halfway, and wherever it ends halfway, it's fine if it's a little jagged. That actually helps, because lines, unless there's a really strong light, generally, or shadows, I mean, unless there's a really strong light, like, they generally don't end in a hard line. They're shaded across. I'm gonna add a little bit more to this as it dries. And again, I'm gonna do probably 2 layers on these. So I've rinsed my brush out. I did my halfway across with all my greens there. And now I'm gonna start back at the bottom where I started. And I'm gonna take a little water and a pretty clean brush, and I'm just gonna drag that color the rest of the way across, but it's gonna be lighter over on the right side because I'm just dragging a little bit from the edge of that first bit of paint I put on there. And then once you get to the top, it's, so there's not as much pigment. And I can see that it's already drying, and it's kind of drying this way across, that I'm definitely gonna need another layer on this side to hold that deep richness. And again, you can just dab, dab, dab some of that extra pigment in or on top. I'm just gonna smooth that out a little bit, but not go too crazy. I'm not even gonna go all the way over to the edge on this second round, because I want that other edge to seem kind of bright. All right, so our green is done. And again, we might want to do another layer. That's fine. I'm letting it dry. Now I'm going to let that dry and then go in and do the red. Same technique, same way. We're going to use the same red so it ties these together. But I'm going to do my second layer. Oh, excuse me. I'm going to do my second layer on my purple guy over here. I'm going to just give him a little more. Just going to dab right into that shadow. Go. Rinse off my brush, dab it off on my towel, and feather out those edges. Smooth them out. Okay. Let them dry. Same thing for my burgundy over here. The burgundy is pretty dense. I can hear my children. You can probably hear my children playing Fortnite down. I don't know. Among Us, Fortnite, one of them. Downstairs in the basement. You think an entire floor between you would keep the volume down, but I guess it's a very exciting game or games, I'm sure. How many of you out there who has kiddos into the online gaming with the Among Us, Fortnite, Minecraft? And I have older ones too, so they're into oh, I can't even think of the names of them, but some of the bigger games, the more grown-up games, I guess, on Xbox and whatnot. So if you have little kiddos, it's coming. I'm sorry. We tried to keep them away from it forever. And we succeeded for a long time. And then they went to school and they have friends. Okay, so we're gonna go into our red stripes. Now you'll notice on this one, and you'll see we do details later, polka dots. You'll notice on this one, I have these white lines in between the red and green stripes. Those are on top. So I use bleed proof white for those. So I'm not gonna be leaving that white space. I'm gonna go right up against the green, and then I'm gonna go back in later and add on those white stripes on top, okay? You could certainly try to leave those white spaces, but it would be difficult. It would certainly take a steady hand to do that really fine detailed work and to get a really clean stripe. I highly do not recommend it. So again, I'm painting the edge of this hat with these red stripes just about halfway over. I'm trying not to overlap the green too much, but if I do a little bit, you know, I'm not worried about it because I know I'm going back in with that white, bleed proof white. You could also try a gel pen perhaps over top. Maybe you have more control with a pen. So they have gel pens in pure white or in silver. Or maybe gold would look really cute or interesting. And then you just have a little more control when you go over than doing it with bleed proof white and a brush. So again, I'm just dragging that pigment from the very edge with a clean brush. So there's no pigment on my brush when I start, just water. And I just drag it across the hat. So it's much lighter on the right side than it is on the left side. And you will see, but they're the same color, you know, the pigment is still there. It's just a much lighter version of it, as if light was hitting it, or, you know, this part was in shadow. And I believe I did a second coat last time that I did this earlier today on these. I'm just going right through. I didn't let them dry very long, but that's okay. Oh, I overlapped that green a little bit more than I planned to. I'm gonna have to stop leaning on my hand while I'm talking to you because I'm mumbling. Ugh. I'm trying to be, you know, when you paint, I don't know how you guys feel, but when I paint, I get in the zone. So I'm trying not to go into the zone while I'm trying to teach you how to paint, because I don't want to stare off into space and then I'm not very exciting to listen to. So now we have this beautiful striped hat with this beautiful shadow on the one side, light source on the other side, and both of these hats kind of have this light in this area. So there is definitely light coming from this direction in this painting, this way in. Okay, we are winding our way down to almost being, oh, we're about halfway there, halfway finished. Okay, so stick with me. We are now going to go into, I'm just trying to see how long our video is so far, but I can't tell. That's okay. Oh, there it is. Okay, we're about 28 minutes. So we're gonna go into the brims of our hats, which do have a little bit of shadow in them to give them some form. And then our beards here, which also, once again, have, they have shadows in them. Even though they're going to be white, they still have shadows. So I chose, in this one, I did the shadows in the hats a very, very light purple, and the beards a very, very light, like iced blue color. So shadows do have color, whether you want them to or not. They are not pure black, and whites are never pure white. I'm trying to remember if I used this blue or this blue. We're gonna find out in 1 second. I think I used this second blue here, just watered down a lot. So I took this kind of more robin's egg. Well, I don't know if it's robin's egg. That wouldn't be the color I give it. Are these labeled on the back? They are not. So this blue, I'm gonna put it into one of my wells over here, add a lot of water. So watercolor, the more water you add, the lighter the color. And we have this really nice light ice blue here. So I'm gonna use that for the beards. So in our beards, just under, the shadows are going to be just under the nose. If you wanna create, so let's add these just under the nose. And if you want to create a sense of, you know, little hairs kind of bunching together, in these other beards, so these scraggly lines here, oh, this is actually a little too light. Let's add a little more pigment to that. And I think it's because my lines that I drew in are so dark that that light blue that I'm adding in almost looks non-existent next to them. So light next to these other like really strong colors. So I'm going to go around kind of where that scraggly tufts of hair would come together and just trace out some, it doesn't have to be every single one, but trace out some kind of V-shaped, you know, clumps of hair that end in these V's at the end there. And the same for here. I'm going to give these a little blue shadow around the nose because there's definitely a shadow. So a few gathered hairs around the nose, and then even a little line. And you know what? We can add another one of these in later after we do the nose, a little darker. Just under the brim of the hat will provide like a little shadow. All right. And as those dry, they're going to lighten up even more. And then when we put in our nose, the flesh color, and then our line drawing later, it's going to balance out really nicely. So this part of this guy's beard here, under the mustache, I'm really going to fill most of it in as a shadow, and it'll even be a little bit darker. And then under this guy's beard here. There we go. Okay. We're getting there. We're almost there. Now the brims of our hats. I chose to do the shadows on these. You could do the blue again there, but I chose to do this light purple. Just thinking, you know, there's a different kind of fabric or material, so they might have a slightly different colored shadow. So really watered down that purple. And actually I'm going to add a little bit of this blue to it and make it more of an icy purple. And giving a shadow on the side. This guy doesn't have a brim, although I realize this little chunk down here I forgot to put in red. This cottony brim here, we're just going to go kind of scoop around the edges and then scoop similarly, like we're drawing little tufts of a cloud inside the brim. So just a couple in there. And this guy is just going to have a little bit of a shadow towards the bottom and on the side, just to show, again, that form and that shape, that it's white, but nothing is ever purely white and or black in the shadow. Okay, and we are, we just have our pom-pom to do up here, same thing. The pom-poms, the closer they are gathered, or where they're gathered and they meet the tip of the hat is where they're darkest. You know, if you gather something up and crumple it together, there's a lot of dark recessed lines there. So that's where the shadow tends to be the darkest. And then as it goes out, just a few swish, swish, swish brushy lines. Okay, and now we're going to get into our flesh tone color. And I'm gonna test this out because this, you do want it to be relatively subtle. These guys, their noses, they're Nordic elves. They're gonna have lighter skin. They have, but it's cold, so they probably are a little pinkish from the cold. And oh my goodness, I hope you can hear them downstairs. They're in trouble. I'm gonna have to yell at them after this. Just trying to put together a YouTube video for you guys, but you're getting to see the real life action at the Cersei house. All right. Okay, so for the noses, you're just gonna dab that light colored pigment in there, but leave some spots without as much. Make it heavy in some spots and lighter in some others, because that's what's gonna give us kind of that ruddy nose look where it's, you know, it's a little red, it's a little pink. I try to keep the darker bits to the edge and make it a little lighter in the center. Because again, as the nose sticks out the furthest, it's gonna have a little bit more light cast on it, but the rest of it is kind of curving away from you. So putting a little bit of that pigment, I can even take a little bit of, and make that sound as you do it. There we go. All right, so I have some little pink ready-nosed elves or gnomes, excuse me. So now the last two steps that we have to do are paint on the details, so the white details of the dots and the lines on here. And then if you want, you don't have to, if you don't want to leave the background completely white, I would recommend doing a very light wash. I did a very light tan, like yellowish color on this one that I think I might do again for this one. I'm just painting in this forgotten little bit of red stripe at the bottom here. And since it's all the way on this side of the hat, I'm gonna make it all kind of the same color. There we go. Perfect. Okay, so if you want to do, I'm going to do this kind of goldish brown color. Give it, you know, it's going to give it, using this really light brown as a wash. So I'm going to add a lot of water to it. And when I put it on my swatch, you can see it like barely makes a color. Whoops, I got it into the purple. My scrap paper. You can see there. Yeah, you can barely see it on the camera. But it's this like almost tea-stained color that I'm gonna put on the background just to add a little warmth to it so it's not that stark white. You could do a light wash of blue. Actually, you know what? Let's do a light like iced blue. Changed my mind. Yeah, like that color. And that'll give it maybe that, instead of warm, you know, when I said warm it up, I was like, ooh, but maybe it's cold because we are in. Now you do want to be careful not to touch, especially with these other, you know, slightly lower end paints. They tend to, when, even after they're put on the page, if you get them wet again, if you touch them with water again, they are going to bleed. So you want to make sure when you're putting your background in, not to go back in and touch the other parts of the painting. Otherwise, you might not be happy that all that hard work starts to run into your background. There we go. And a little bit more on this, on this other side. Make some more blue for myself, add some more water. Make sure we're kind of in the same region. So I'm giving all that other paint time to dry before I put on my details by doing this background. Yeah, I like this. It's giving it a little bit of depth, dimension, rather than sometimes when you leave the background completely white, it looks really clean and really nice. And then sometimes, depending on the composition and the painting and what you're doing, sometimes it just feels, I don't know, like unfinished, to have a completely white background. But you know, you can see here where I've done like a little bit of the background and it's really a subtle color. You can probably barely see that on camera. But it's already making this little pom-pom pop more because it's slightly darker than the white spaces I left in the pom-pom. So we have the purpley colored shadow, and then I left white spaces, and then around the edges I have this very subtle blue color. So it makes that start to pop off the page, and it's going to make our little beards pop off the page a little bit more. I'm going to add it between these guys down here. There we go. And I am going to bring in some purple into this bottom beard so it's a slightly different color than the background. So we don't think it's part of the background, we think it's part of this beard. Okay, so that part is done. And then our very last piece is to go in and add one. You could decide to do another layer on any of these hats here or anywhere else if you just feel like it isn't dark enough, isn't deep enough. You can see this one is even a little darker, so I must have gone even another layer here, another layer here. I'm just gonna leave it. I love my center hat here. I feel like this one is much lighter, but this one really held the color well, and it has this beautiful curve in that shape. So I'm really happy with that. I'm gonna leave it. And I am gonna finish this trio of gentlemen here with some Dr. P.H. Martin bleed proof white. I love this stuff. It is so great for adding details, little white details in watercolor when you just can't keep those tiny little white spaces. You know, painting around a bunch of polka dots certainly could be possible in watercolor. Not fun in this tiny space here. And it's just much nicer or easier to go in, and it looks really nice. The bleed proof white does such a great job of sitting right on top of the watercolor, and I just love it so much. It can also help you fix like little mistakes sometimes when you have a little tiny splatter, or if it's in a spot where you can't use a magic eraser. Yes, magic eraser can pull watercolor paint right off your paper if you have like a little spot that, you know, you get into a white space and you don't need to repaint over it. Magic eraser is amazing. I will definitely demonstrate that at one point. I'm sure I will make a mistake at some point. I'm putting some of my dots, my polka dots on this guy, right on the edge and not fully rounded. So the edge goes right to, you know, it has a little bit of a flat edge there. It's because, again, if this was a fabric and that dot was wrapped around the side, that is how it would actually appear. I'm gonna throw some smaller dots in here, filling in some of these places. Put one right on the edge. There we go. So cute. Okay, now our last piece of fine motor control. I'm gonna wet down my bleed proof white a little bit so it runs nice and smooth, and I'm gonna add in these white lines between the green and the red, and it's just gonna finish this off so nicely. There we go. Boop, boop, boop. Just makes it pop, and it cleans up those edges between the colors. If you had any little like bumpy areas or where the green or the red overlapped each other unintentionally or bled into each other a little bit, this kind of just covers that right up. Again, I thought they looked really cool or really awesome before I put this on. I could have left them that way, but I just like this detail. I feel like it really finishes off this hat and makes it pop. There we go. So lovely. And then if, because I did water it down a little bit, its opacity went down a little bit. So you can go back in and add another layer if you just want it to, the white to pop a little bit more. There we go. Beautiful, beautiful, cute little gnomes. And then, oh my gosh, this is gonna be the longest video ever, but that's okay. If you're still with me at this point, you're gonna love this next piece. I am going to add some line drawings. So this one has no line drawings on it. This one does, and you can see it just adds another level of interest to the piece. It definitely makes it very illustrative, and I'm gonna add that to here. So you get a little sense of that in this one because I did leave my pencil lines so dark, and normally I wouldn't do that when I'm painting, but I knew I was gonna add this in. So I'm just gonna sketch, and I'm not gonna fill in every line that I have drawn. I'm going to leave it very sketchy and just go through and add, sorry, my bracelets are scraping across the table. So I'm gonna add in some details in the beard, some of which I haven't even drawn in pencil. I just felt like they should go there. I try to be, I don't know, when I do this, I don't always have a rhyme or reason for which lines I choose and which lines I don't. But when I do it, I try not to be too perfect. I'm not trying to like trace the outline exactly. I am, because I just don't think that looks quite right. But I don't have any magic lessons or reasons why or how I add these sketchy lines in. Sorry, that you are going to have to figure out for yourself. I am gonna add some edges in. I'm not gonna trace any of my details, any of my polka dots or stripes, because I think they look so great on their own. Actually, I lied. I'm gonna add, but just not to all of them, just a few to my stripes right there where I added the little bit of sketch on the edge. You do want to be careful. You want to make sure your painting is dry before you do this. I had some areas where it was not, so I'm getting a little gunk on my micro pen, and then it's not coming out. That's okay. I cleaned it off. But don't ruin your micro pens. Okay. There, I think that's good. Add a little bit to the tip up here. And you don't even always have to follow the exact shape. Sometimes I let the pen go inside the line. Sometimes I let it go outside the line so it's not perfectly on the edge of the watercolor. It gives us this really cute kind of sketchy look. So here are my 3 gnomes, and why don't we, let's take the tape off because having that border of color, see where you can really see the color now that we added on the border, and it makes this look like a little framed picture, like a snapshot of these 3 little gnomes. And here it is. The card is folded, and now we have 2 versions of these guys here. I can't get them all in frame. One with a blue background, one with a yellowish background. You can see on this one I did some splatters, which I didn't particularly care for after I did it, so I didn't do it on this one, or didn't show you. So there are 3 gnomes. Thank you so much for sticking with me on this little bit longer tutorial, but I hope you enjoyed it. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already done so. Come back tomorrow for day 5 of 25 days till Christmas, and we'll have another video for you. Maybe I will even get my act together and record a couple of these ahead of time so I don't have to frantically create them for you right before they release. So thank you again and have a great night.